My father came to New Zealand in 1910, but 1920. He was preceded by my grandfather who came in 1910. Well, they worked in a laundry actually. They came to New Zealand and arrived in Dunedin, and Dunedin was, I suppose, the city where most Chinese came, because that was the city they had to pass through to get to the gold mines in central Otago. My mother didn't join him until 1940. They came from Toisan, which is a part of Guangzhou or Canton, as did, of course, really virtually all the Chinese in those early years came from the Canton area, from southern China. My mother talked about her trip, because my mother was a very hardy person. She was, I like to describe her as being 5 foot tall, 5 foot wide, and then she was always a jolly person. But it was a pretty tough trip out there, because they had steerage class, which I presume was kind of really at the bottom of the boat, and the weather was not good. And she said she was the only wife there who didn't get seasick, who had all their meals. Everybody else was very, very ill through a great deal of the voyage. But I don't think that the discrimination was the type that was evil or anything. It was among children giving cheek to each other, and because you're Chinese, you look different. So "Ching Chong Chinaman" was just a catchphrase. So that kind of thing happened all the time. When I was born in 1941, my father had the laundry. I was the firstborn of their 6 children. So my father realised pretty early on that he wasn't going to be able to support a family in a laundry business, because the synthetic garments were coming into existence in the late 40s, and laundry businesses really weren't too much nylon focused, and so he decided that he should change tack, and he bought a fish and chip shop. Yeah, well, it was reasonably popular because he made enough money to be able to support a family, buy a house, educate everybody, and then be able to retire. So it was reasonably successful. Yeah. It was a very close community, because Dunedin is not a huge big city, so that if there was a wedding, virtually everybody was invited. So there was a lot of communal cooking. So I have lovely memories of parties where the wives would get together and kind of slaughter chickens and chop up mushrooms and clean vegetables and prepare shark's fin soup and things like that, and everybody pitched in together. And as a kid, my job was being the waiter and cleaning the tables afterwards. I've always known that I am Chinese. I know that I'm different from Europeans because we look different. I know that, I speak Chinese and they don't. I know that I use chopsticks, and I've used chopsticks all my life, and they don't, but they've learned to. The discipline that my parents taught in myself and my 5 sisters were that, when you're at school you speak English, but when you come home you speak Chinese, because that was the only way that they could ensure that we retained something of Chinese heritage. We had a Chinese school in Dunedin. What I went to school, and from the age of about 7 until about 14, I went to a Chinese school in Dunedin, which we met for about 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, after normal school, and I learned to read and write a bit to the extent that I could write simple letters. But the reality is that it's the use it or lose it the situation, that because I didn't continue on with that, I apart from being able to write my own name, I'm not really pretty good at any good at just writing freehand, apart from copying. As far as reading is concerned, I remember odd words so that I can read one or two signs, but not the entire sign, so that I get into more trouble trying to read because I get the wrong meaning out of a whole lot of things. So it's it's a matter of regret. Nobody used chopsticks way back in those days except Chinese, but today, everybody knows how to use chopsticks. And I think that through food, the cultures blend, the ethnicities blend. Today you've got Chinese, you've got Malaysian, you've got Japanese, Indian, all whatever food, and the thing is that most people will have a go at every kind of food. And that brings people together, because eating different foods introduces you to a different culture and a different understanding, and that not everything is just fish and chips, or and I think maybe if I stayed in the fish and chip shop, I'd be wealthier or happier. I'd probably be dead because I'd be eating too much fish and chips, but this teacher suggested that I should study law. So I went to Otago University, but my first year was a disaster academically. Socially, it was a brilliant year. I did all the things that students have reputations for doing, except I really didn't know how to study that well. So I had a year that was only half successful, but then I learned and qualified as a lawyer. I was interested, I suppose, in local government or in community. When I got married and we had children, I wanted to be part of my children's education. So I was involved with the schools and with school committees and very much involved in that. And through that, I got involved in the community and other organisations. I stood for city council way in the late early 1990s, and was successful. I served 3 terms as a councillor, and then I became the mayor of Dunedin in 2004. I served 2 terms, so I served 6 years. As part of celebrating 150 years of European settlement in Otago, the Chinese community decided to build a Chinese garden as a gift to the city of Dunedin. When I became the mayor, we built up the relationship with Shanghai. One of the first things I did was to visit Shanghai, and I met with the mayor with our delegation. The Shanghai government were hugely helpful in building and helping us create Lan Yuan, which is the Dunedin Chinese Garden, which is the only authentic Chinese garden in Australasia. I I was looking forward to visiting Shanghai. I had written my speech, and what basically I was saying that how proud I was to be there because my father came from China with nothing. My mother came with nothing. I was born in New Zealand, and now I am coming back to China representing the country where I was born, where my parents live, going back to my zhuguo, to my roots there, and how proud I was to be like that. Now, I'd written this the way that I thought I wanted to say it and tried to memorize it. When I had the opportunity of actually saying all that, it was just so emotional that I broke down. It was a very, for me, one of the most moving things that I've ever tried to do. I am firstly a New Zealander. I'm a New Zealander of Chinese ethnicity, of which I'm hugely proud. I think for Chinese people like me, between 1940 and 2022, is that in 1940, China was a country which was not very wealthy, which had all sorts of issues, that had been downtrodden, had been looked down upon by the whole Western world. Today in 2020, China is up there. It's a leader of the world. Every country looks up to China, not down on China. And that makes me, as somebody who is of Chinese ethnicity, hugely proud. But I'm no less proud of the fact that I'm a New Zealander still, first and foremost. So I don't think it's not a split loyalty. It's just that, right, I'm glad to be alive. I'm glad to be alive in New Zealand, and I'm glad that, right, I've had the heritage that I've had.